Hello, this is Connor Stoops and welcome back to another Lumen Legacy HTUC video, and today's video is on Teridescent. Teridescent, based on its attributes, looks to be one of the better sweepers to come out in this patch, but not only this patch, but in the entire metagame. Teridescent has a bunch of attributes that not only help it offensively, but can of course help it set up and deal massive amounts of damage, so let's talk about it. Today's video, we're going to be talking about how to use and counter Teridescent. From the counters and checks in teammates in order to know how to use Teridescent in the battles, as well as building roles and sets in order to team build around Teridescent, today's video is all about how to use and counter Teridescent. So the role that Teridescent is going to be playing is a very essential question to ask, because we of course need to know how to use it, but its base stats can help answer that question. One thing to know about Teridescent is that it has pretty low range defense. While this isn't objectively pretty low, this is a weak point on most Teridescents, so unless you are putting investment into this, range attackers are going to be the main threat of your survival. Of course, your range attack stat, never use this, and your speed stat of 70, this speed stat is able to outspeed some walls such as Obsidian, Cetamar's Gargoyle Defense, but it's generally going to be getting outsped by many offensive lumens unless you are of course boosting yourself with Drudge. However, I will give props to Teridescent for having a good energy stat. This lets you get up to 250 energy pretty easily, which is a very common benchmark for any offensive Lumion. And of course, you won't need much to invest into this energy, and you can put TPs elsewhere. This will also make Teridescent unable to be prone to waiting or resting, because it's gonna have to use a bunch of moves before it will need to get to that. And of course, the rest of your stats are pretty great, with your HP stat and melee defense stat all being above 100. This will make Teridescent pretty bulky and can withstand dark type melee hits, which is something it's weak to, and of course hit them back super effectively. Teridescent can also play a somewhat of a melee defensive role on many teams, which is pretty good for any Teridescent user. Your melee attack stat of 112 is higher than the likes of Borok, and while you aren't going to be out-damaging other melee wall breakers such as Halvantic, C.B.O, Joltooth, and Barbadger, this melee attack stat is still something good to have, because this makes you less prone to being taken advantage of other Lumions that can set up on you. So, what's the role that Teridescent going to be playing in your matches? Well, it's pretty simple if you paid attention. It does have great setup potential, so Teridescent can be a pretty good sweeper role with the move Drudge. Because its speed tier is pretty low and you do have a Drudge move, you are going to be able to outspeed many offensive Lumions, and like I said, you do have a pretty good defenses, so sweeping teams with Drudge is always a possibility to happen. Not to mention that this will boost Teridescent's attacks even more, which will make Teridescent overall a pretty great threat on your team. So with that out of the way, let's talk about the many sets for Teridescent. So the first set that I'll be talking about is a Nimble Sweeper set. The ability of choice is going to be mesmerizing, because this will make it so you cannot be outsped by priority users. And the first set is Nimble. This is so you can outspeed as much as you can from only one Drudge. Well, it's definitely going to be taking you more than one Drudge to actually sweep a team consistently. This will make it so you are completely threatening after one setup move for one turn. Your personality is going to be Brawny Nimble. This is so you can outspeed as much as you can while also hitting as hard as possible. And your moveset is going to be Drudge, Hydro Slash, Hyper Sting, and Parasitize. Admittedly, I would prefer Primal Slash over Parasitize, not only because it's stab, but it also does let you hit things for more neutral damage. But Parasitize is objectively the better move, I have to admit, mainly because it does let you hit plant types, and it of course lets you hit more stuff super effectively. Hyper Sting is so we can actually use our light stab, and Hydro Slash is so we can hit the earth and fire types and other Lumions that are weak to water for super effective damage. For the item of choice, the health amulet is a perfect item for Teridescent. You're basically going to be recovering your damage taken, and because you do have the defensive utility of very good melee defenses, you can be able to swap in on Lumions such as Obsidian to actually abuse them and set up your Drudges. Of course, other essences also work, and if you do not have the ability to run any of these items, then running a milkshake is perfectly fine. And as for the TPs, 144 speed with +1 Drudge will be able to outspeed a nimble 200 speed Zulong. You'll also be able to outspeed other Lumens under that speed tier such as Nimble Ikazune, Garbantis, Glaciadia, and you can hit them all for super effective damage, which is admittedly pretty nice. You have 200 melee attack just to max out your more important stabs, so you can actually deal as much damage as possible. And 4 energy actually works out pretty well for us because this gets up to 250 energy, which is a good benchmark to have. And of course, the rest of your TPs will go into the HP, so we can be as bulky as possible. However, I recommend the other set that I'll be talking about, which is the Robust Sweeper set. This will be able to let you swap in on more melee attackers, specifically Obsidian, and you can take advantage of them much better. And like I said, you're definitely going to be needing more than 1 Drudge, so of course, running more bulkier sets on Drudge Lumion seems to be the best way to go to maximize your TPs. Your ability of choice is still going to be the same, and your personality instead, like you could have guessed, is going to be Brownie Robust, so we can max out our better attacking or our better matchups versus melee attackers, and of course max out our damage. Our moveset is still going to be the same, and the itemable of choice is also going to be the same, while our TPs are going to be different. 160 speed will let you outspeed a Nimble Ferroglyph at +1. This will make it so you can hit the Ferroglyphs back super effectively, and because Ferroglyph, at least on paper, looks to be a very strong Lumion in this metagame, it will be very valuable to outspeed Ferroglyphs and just Ferroglyphs in general, which is just very nice. And you have a 200 melee attack stat, which will be able to let you hit as hard as possible. 4 energy rule, just because it works out, and our 136 HP are the leftovers. So with that out of the way, let's talk about the offensive encounters and checks as well as its teammates for Teridescent. So offensive and defensive counters and checks. While there aren't many offensive counters and checks for Teridescent, the ones that do offensively check Teridescent are really great. First off, metal types such as Valkyrie and Stratosaur and Hunder are going to be your best matchups against Teridescent. Ignoring Hunder's weakness to Hydro Slash, Valkyrie and Stratosaur completely wall this thing. And because Valkyrie and Stratosaur are mainly going to be running more bulkier sets, Stratosaur can even check it before its soul bursts, it's going to be very consistent answers for Teridescent. If you want to run something that can offensively check it by outspeeding it, then Vesperatu and Cosmere Unleashed, specifically the Spec Meteor version, is going to be doing a lot of damage against Teridescent. Dukuda is also the same situation as here as well, and an important thing to know is that after +1 Drudge, Teridescent is going to be outspeeding pretty much everything on this list. So just be careful here. Valkyrie and Stratosaur are your best options in terms of offensive counters and checks. However, excluding these guys, you do have defensive counters and checks. You still have very clever Stratosaurs doing probably the best one to Teridescent out of all of these guys. Darburg is also a very good candidate, not only because it does have tank, but it does have the option to hit Teridescent on either the melee or range defense side because it does have the stats to do that. And Luminami is also a pretty decent check to Teridescent, although Luminami doesn't really do anything back, so the best it can really do is pivot off. And of course, more bulkier sets of Valkyries that even though they can still run offensive Valkyries with bulky sets, they can still check Teridescent either way. And of course, the offensive and defensive teammates, you just want to run stuff that can of course break its answers. Ursoul, Ikazune, Meditoad, and Alvantic, the trend here are electric type Lumions or Lumion second hit that stops pretty easily. Usually electric types are the best answers for opposing metal types, and for Lumions such as Ikazune, they can even hit dark types super effectively. Ursoul is also a pretty good stop and a pretty good teammate for Teridescent, mainly because it provides itself as a priority user. So if Teridescent doesn't like to have something in front of it that does outspeed it, you can bring in Ursoul to offensively check them with priority moves. There are of course other options, so don't feel that you are limited to these options. So with that out of the way, let's talk about the conclusion and my thoughts on Teridescent. So overall, Teridescent looks to be a very solid sweeper for any type of team. Teridescent, because of its defensive attributes and honestly its bulk in general, it's going to be making itself to be a pretty good Lumion on a lot of teams, not only because it can efficiently sweep, but because it does have its defensive attributes to take advantage of. Teridescent can be a really good soft check for many melee attackers, which honestly is probably the best niche I've seen in a sweeper for quite a while. We haven't seen any drudge sweepers such as Teridescent. The closest thing we have is, well, not really anything, which is very good for Teridescent's case. What's even better is that its ability mesmerizing makes it so priority moves cannot even do anything to a Teridescent, which admittedly is probably kind of on the broken side of things, but Teridescent overall, I don't think it's a Lumion worth being put into the banned tier. It's just a very good combination of a Lumion and an ability. So, what are your thoughts on Teridescent? In my opinion, I think it's a pretty great Lumion, but let me know what you think in the comment section below. Of course, if you enjoyed the video and found something informational about it, then I suggest you like the video and subscribe. If you want to see more Intensity Part 2 content, of course subscribe, and of course look at my channel so you can actually see all of those videos. This is Cotton Stoops, signing off to remind you that Zulong is still a dumpster fire.